Welcome this week to Talking Flutes Extra with me, the old flute geezer, Jean-Paul Wright. I don't know if you can hear me because we're actually at the NAMM Show in sunny Anaheim, California.
Correct.
And I am stood next to a wonderful doctor. Now, not a medical doctor, although he may convince you that he can be a medical doctor. It is Dr. Keith Hanlon. Hello, Keith.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. You're an educator, you're
Correct.
a nerd, but we'll redefine nerd later.
Absolutely.
It's important we define nerd and nerdiness in musical instruments, and the reason why this world needs nerds.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
But tell me first about why are you here, and what do you get what do you learn when you go around all the booths? Because this is the world's biggest B2B, business to business, and show in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It covers stage and sound, audio, band and orchestra, publishers, music, print, guitars. Everything is here. So we're here promoting the Trevor James brand and introducing it to a lot of potentially new dealers, players who maybe have come across one that a friend had, and they're getting a chance to actually try the instruments and give us feedback. So that's really the best aspect, is getting feedback.
And what's really interesting to me from a distance is your life is not necessarily encompassed in what you're doing here. So let's talk about Flute Examiner.
Oh, thanks for asking. So it was about 2016. A friend of mine, Amanda, had started an online pedagogical newsletter and asked me to help her with it. So we've built it up. We've added Kelly and Jessica and now Rebecca. So we have a whole team now that's working on it. But it's a free newsletter for flute people. We cover everything. We talk about pedagogy. We talk about repair. We talk about health and wellness. And we basically talk about it from a standpoint of a human being. We're not trying to beat you to death with dictionary words and thesauruses. We're talking about real life experiences, our own personal injuries, experiences with us as our own flute players. And we're starting to expand and bring more teachers and players in and contributors. So it is a free newsletter, the Flute Examiner, and we do a lot of really fun interviews with fun people, and especially coming to shows like this, it's great because we make a lot of contacts to continue bringing new information to all our flute friends.
Now, you live in a world of highly educated educators and people that like to delve into the depths of the instruments that we're playing and that we're working on. The Flute Examiner, however, goes to a wider audience, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We write it from a standpoint where we want a junior high kid who's just curious and wants to know about things, up to a college professor who just wants to share information or learn just a little bit more. So it's a very down-to-earth approach. We don't want to make it too intellectual. We don't want to make it too watered down. We're trying to find that happy balance of just having a conversation.
And how do you get that conversation to work for the high school kid and the university professor?
We bring in a lot of our own experiences as teachers and players and former and current students, and we try to think about what our readers want to know, what they should know, without going too in depth, but we also try to aim them in the right direction so that if they want to know more, they can find it. They know how to look for it, and they can start forming the questions so they know what to ask.
Got you. And you've got a low flute section, which I know you've just taken delivery of a monster.
Yes, I have.
Can you tell our audience, our Talking Flutes podcast audience, exactly what monster you've taken?
Yeah, so I focused on piccolo through a majority of my career with the military and my doctorate, and I absolutely love the piccolo. But over the years, I found myself getting further and further into the low flutes, as it were, and recently just purchased a contrabass of my very own. And just like the Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. If you own a contra, you'll get asked to play it.
And you had to order it from Japan, didn't you?
I did. I went big, or I was going to go home. So I got a really beautiful handmade Japanese contra.
Cantata flute.
Yes, yeah, cantado.
How did you find that? Because contras, I always find contras really difficult to get that initial sound until
Absolutely.
You find the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Obviously, the cantata is it's the Rolls Royce of.
Absolutely.
And it's very different to the Kingma.
Yeah.
So,
Both wonderful instruments.
They are both wonderful instruments, but how did the sweet spot show itself straight away as soon as you played it?
So with that particular instrument, I immediately fell in love with the low end. It's just really rich and full. Surprisingly, the cantado plays beautifully in the third octave as well.
What?
Strangely enough. And I also got the trill keys because it does help with some fingering, alternate fingerings. But the mid-range is where it kind of goes through a voice shift, and you have to approach it a lot like you're playing harmonics on a C flute. You're strengthening a partial with a fingering, and so that mid-range is a little tricky to get used to, and that first octave jump it's such a thick sound that, it takes a little bit of work to get used to that. But I knew as soon as I played it, it just was the right sound.
There have been many people who listen to this podcast that think of contrabass flutes just going bom, 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 bom. Why do you need to go into the third octave?
So, it's quite funny you mentioned that, because the next flute choir concert that I'm playing with my contra is a lot of bum bum, because we're doing a march, we're doing some other. So I'm literally playing a tuba part for the most part. A friend of mine, Jonathan Cohen, plays contra as well and writes beautifully for it, and he owns a cantado as well, so he's quite familiar with the instrument, and he writes just fun contra parts. So he does explore some of those extended ranges, or just the different voicings that you can do. As a solo instrument, I think you should be able to play the full range of any instrument that you're playing on. It's about developing that voice, developing the sound, and adding more color and texture to the overall field. Like the sound of the flute choir, just like a bass flute up in the third octave, has a haunting sound or haunting quality. The contra has its own sound up there. I mean, you might call it whale song, but but it's a different color, and it brings new texture and possibilities to flute repertoire.
How about flute technique, tonguing? Because the lip plate is so big. Yeah. How do you control the tonguing aspect of it? How do you get that message from the top all the way down to the bottom?
I articulate last week.
That's the name of the podcast.
You've got to have a lot of coffee to be ahead of the beat so that it'll actually speak when it's supposed to. No, as far as you do have to kind of be a little ahead of what you want to do so that it is where it needs to be. With the NFA LGBTQ choir that I played with, there was a piece I had to play a low F tongue ram on a contra. I did start that about 2 measures before it actually had to be placed. That was a little tricky. That took some time. And I think I got my tongue stuck in the embouchure hole, but I got used to it, and it's a neat effect.
And tell me about that flute choir.
So that initially started, we did a memorial for Matthew Shepard, and we did it over Zoom. And it just so happened I had a contra on loan at that point, and they asked me to play it. And so that was the initial start. We did a first concert live a couple years back. Last year at NFA, they gave us a lobby concert, which there were probably 200 people there listening, and the lobby was packed. And as of this coming NFA, we're now an official ensemble of NFA.
Official ensemble?
Yeah, official ensemble of NFA.
But the joy that came from that, and people there watching it, it seemed to be an energy there with that choir that you sort of, I wouldn't say you struggle to get in other choirs, because do you find sometimes as flutists, or flautists, as some of us like to be called, I'm a flutist, you're a flutist, but, just to keep the politically correct.
Yes.
Do you find that sometimes we're too serious? So when we're playing in a flute choir, we are sort of in our own little world. But what the feedback from me, from your flute choir, was the joy that came from it.
Oh, yeah, that choir is really about celebrating. We have a lot of fun, a lot of big personalities, a lot of side remarks, joking. We get together, we play, we have fun, and the level of musicianship in that group, we show up, we can play the parts, so it really is just fun. It's fun. There's a lot of laughing, there's a lot of crying. I get emotional thinking about it right now.
The thing is, and the joy of, so you get emotional about something like that, is not only the fact that you can come together as a group, but the fact that music should be about emotion.
Absolutely.
And when you're putting your personal perspective into those little blobs on sticks on a sheet of paper, something magic happens.
Oh, it's great. It's you leave that concert, everybody's smiling, they're very happy. Yeah. We're hugging, we're glad to be with each other, we're family.
And I think we need to do more of that in the flute
Absolutely.
world. And that is lacking.
We get too stuck on what we're doing, and I think we get too stuffy. We don't play from the heart. We play the notes, we play the rhythms. there's a lot more to it than just playing what's on the page and getting the right fingerings. There's a lot of energy that needs to be put into it to share it.
And it all comes back to the original thing: is what makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up as an audience member, which is hearing emotion, it is seeing emotion, and it's feeling emotion.
Yeah.
And if you're very rigid, you're playing the dots perfectly.
Yeah.
But you're lacking emotion, becomes robotic.
It's
so
very
when
stale.
all that comes together in one piece, you think, wow.
Yeah. The energy in that performance, it was absolutely incredible.
So let's look at energy and performance and go completely off-piste.
Sure.
Let's look at nerd. You are a self-confessed nerd.
Absolutely.
But you're not a nerd as... When I was at school, there was nerds.
Yep.
And then there was sort of the jocks that were the sporty type.
Sure.
But you're not a nerd as in the nerd that I used to think were the nerds at school.
Right.
Because your nerdiness is what the whole of the music industry needs in musical instrument development. Because it's the nerds that find out where the tweaks need to be made. It's the nerds that find the problems. And it's the nerds that solve issues. So you just have a love for the working mechanism of the things that we call flutes, don't you?
Absolutely. I think being a flute nerd isn't just about knowing the composers and the music and the history. I mean, that's very academic. When you get into the mechanics of the instrument, when you get into the history of the instrument, and bringing other things into it. You know, I do some 3D printing of my Dungeons and Dragons minis for my gaming group. I bring in CAD design and the problem solving that I use, I apply to the flute. I've learned from woodworking, gaming, the gaming world alone, just playing our Saturday game with my friends, some that I work with, and my fiance. The teamwork that you have to do in a game like that to problem solve whatever enemy you're up against in the game applies to the mechanical development of instruments as well. You are not just fixing the problem yourself, you're working with other people to determine and problem solve and how best to do that. I bring a lot the other non-musical things to what I do as my problem solving.
Which is quite unusual because you bring the musical side because you're a musician.
Yeah.
And you bring the technical side. And just for our listeners, for me, when Keith is in a room with our technical director, David, there is a language going on that it could be Serbo-Croat, it could be Chinese. I really don't understand what is being said. But the dialogue between the two of you creates the energy for us to look at things. It could be a little thing that you'd noticed that David, you both sit and nerd about.
Absolutely.
But without people like you within this field, nothing would be developed. So we've got two wonderful piccolos at the moment that you really like. But tell me about your experience working with the brilliant Adam Petrie.
So Adam, several years ago, I've known Adam for quite a few years, and we've become very good friends. I asked him if I could interview him because in his early days of developing, he's been a repair technician, and he made a head joint for my instrument a couple years back. He's one of our nerds, basically. But he and I would have a lot of conversations over the years, and then he let me in on the secret that he was going to be developing a new instrument. And so he let me interview him, and we unveiled that prospect through the Flute Examiner. The article was called "The Man Behind the Curtain," which is a reference to The Wizard of Oz, which is a love of his, Judy Garland. I had the luxury of going to train with him for a week and learn some of the more detailed ideas behind finer finishing of an instrument or a product that's already there, making it better. And problem solving was a large part of that as well. We talked a lot about the wood, the tendencies of the wood, and how that all comes into play and how you work with it, because the piccolo still thinks it's a piece of wood. It doesn't know it's an instrument, and you do have to coax that out of it. And so he's a brilliant man doing wonderful things. He's currently building me an instrument right now, which I just can't wait to get. It's a voice and a sound that is missing. And I think his is a very unique instrument, and it's going to be a big hit. But yeah, he's got a lot of knowledge. He's worked very hard to gain that knowledge. He's gone back and reinvented things over and over again until he gets it right. And it's just, again, it comes back to problem solving and bringing a lot of other areas into the flute and piccolo building and training. He's a wonderful teacher. It was a great experience.
So how does somebody like you and Adam who are perfectionists, how can you temper that? Because you cannot produce perfection, can you? So
No.
what is that level? Because as musicians, we can't reach perfection because that doesn't exist. And it's also based around, sorry, there's a trumpet player banging on behind me, but but how do you, because as musicians, we're judged by the audience or a panel of judges or a teacher. That noise.
I think I just lost a few brain cells.
God, it's dreadful, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, so we work on how good we are or perceived good we are based around the judgments and perceptions of others.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're creating this, so
Yeah.
when you and Adam get together, perfection still can't exist in an instrument, can it?
No.
So
No.
is there ever a point when you're happy or Adam's happy in what you're both doing?
Well, I mean, Adam and I have talked a lot about this, and he is definitely a perfectionist, and I am as well. But I've seen in my career, I've seen a lot of flute players on the constant search for a perfect head joint. And the thing is, the head joint may be acoustically and mechanically and geometrically perfect, but we aren't. And when you add the human variable into it, that changes things. So I think part of the importance of realizing where you've reached the best that it can be is when the person who's playing the instrument has found their voice.
And for me, that's the hardest thing to comprehend because we've all got different chops.
Absolutely.
We've all got different perspectives on what we want. So in effect, Adam, and when you're making things, you're making things blind. You're making it to how you want it and you can feel it. But the voice that you're making is not necessarily the voice that I would want or
Right.
I would expect. But saying that, do you think many of us are fixed in thinking what we want?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about think about the way society has kind of funneled us, 2.5 kids, white picket fence. That's just kind of what everybody's told you should be doing, and that isn't the mold that fits for everybody. So when my customers send me instruments for repair, and they're talking to me about their problems or struggles, my job is to listen to them, figure out what it is. Even when I'm selling a flute and helping them find their flute, listen to what they want, listen to what they're looking for, and try to put that all together and formulate something to kind of set them on the right path. And I think, for the younger players, they're still trying to discover who they are and what they're doing, and I think they lose some of the joy in it. They're so stuck in the practice room, so stuck in just what they think everybody expects from them that they forget to just enjoy it. If your instrument is playing well for you and you love what you're hearing, right notes, wrong notes, doesn't matter, but you're getting the sound that speaks for you. If it isn't what everybody else wants you to sound like, that isn't necessarily the most important thing. You have to love what you're hearing and love what you're doing with it and how you interact with your own instrument. So if that's not making you happy, then maybe you're on the wrong instrument or with the wrong teacher or playing the wrong music.
But the paradox there is what you hear in your ear, which is so close to the flute, and what you feel is not necessarily portrayed 3-4 meters away. So what is the balance when you ask someone to hear you, to the balance of what they're hearing compared to what you're feeling?
I think we all hate hearing our own voice on a recording. We all hate hearing our own flute playing on a recording too. But I do think recording helps a lot because then you can hear what the audience is hearing to some extent. I mean, not everybody's going to buy a $1,500 microphone to make that happen, but it does give you some feedback as to whether the accents are coming through or the shaping of the phrase. I think we also have to be a lot kinder to ourselves. We're too hard on ourselves a lot of the time.
That's the key, being kinder to, and that's really hard as musicians to be kind on yourselves because we're constantly self-critical, aren't we?
That's what we're trained to do. And our jobs are on the line if you're an orchestral player. Wrong notes, wrong phrasing, bad intonation. I mean, you have to keep working like that like anything else. You have to build up your skill level. But at a certain point, if you have the skill and you've put in the time, you have to just let the music happen.
I like that. Let the music happen. But it's a case of trusting yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
But trusting that every note that you make, every sound that you make is valid in its own way.
Yeah.
And not everybody can be a Pahud or a Buryakov.
Yeah.
They can't be that. So in your experience with over the years with the flute players that you've worked with and you've worked alongside, everybody strives for something.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it that people are striving for? Is it for the paycheck? What is it that they're striving as artists for?
I think it varies depending on the person. I mean, there are those who just play for the paycheck. But, I know I've revisited different pieces I've played over the years, and every time I come back to it, I have a different approach. Life changes your perspective. And I listen to recordings from when I was a few years younger, and I think, why did I do that? Or that makes no sense. But at the time, that was the perspective I had. And I think there are a lot of players out there who are just doing it as a job. But there are a lot of players out there, too, who are doing it because they enjoy making music and sharing it.
Well, with you, Keith, what I really like, and over the years I've known you, is music for you is an emotion.
Absolutely.
What you do on the technical side is an emotion.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very undervalued job because you can turn a pig's ear into a silk purse. And that is what good technical people do, because I don't know what the hell you do. I really don't. I've tried to understand, I don't. But you have the ability to find issues, but solve issues. And you look at the flute and you think, yeah, but it's just got a few tappy things for your fingers. But each one of those keys and the padding heights, just the heights between the pad and the tone hole, the embouchure hole and the head joint, there are just so many variables.
Yeah.
That's why people need to put their instruments in for a COA regularly.
Yeah.
They need to understand that if the instrument isn't necessarily performing for them, is it the flute? Or are they generally need a new instrument?
Yeah. My word of advice to people when they start talking about the flute and maybe needing something new is basically, if you know you've put in the time, you know you've done your due diligence in learning and what you're doing, and you're still going, why can't I do that? It's probably the instrument. It's leaking. The instrument may be perfectly fine for what you need, but it may not be an adjustment. So if you ever start asking yourself after, if you've only played something for 10 minutes and still can't do it, well, keep practicing. But if there's something you've been working very hard on for a reasonable amount of time, and why can't I get this? Why can't I do this? There's a really good chance that your head cork is bad, or there's a leak, or a pad is not quite sealing the way it should, or an adjustment's out, or there are any number of things. I mean, I quite honestly have done some repairs for people, very minor repairs for people who were shopping for a brand new instrument, and when they got that adjustment done, they fell in love with their instrument again and realized, I don't need a new instrument. This one is wonderful. I love this instrument. So that little bit of maintenance goes a long way. I've also talked to people who have said, I've never had my flute worked on in 40 years. And I have to laugh a little bit, because would you ever not change the oil in your car for 5 years and expect it to start? There's a certain expectation. It's a mechanical device that you drive your flute just like you drive a car. And if the tires are bald and the oil is 5 years old, it's not going to work. And you can't expect it to help you in an emergency when you need it if it's not being taken care of.
I would endorse 100% everything you say. And I was taught the French tradition, played open hole in line, and I very light, I'm going to be closer to the microphone, very light touch. But sometimes you think the padding's right, but you've automatically start pressing slightly harder.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get those pads altered, or very slightly by a good technician, suddenly the hermetic seal is there, and whoa, the note pops.
The note pops. Yeah, the other thing too is as soon as leaks start, we do have a tendency to physically compensate by squeezing.
We do.
And over time, as our health and wellness person and flute examiner will tell you, it starts to take its toll on your fingers and your wrists and arms. You're creating more tension, you're playing with more tension, and it gradually builds up to, repetitive motion injuries and things. So taking care of your flute, in a sense, does take care of you. You can avoid injuries by making sure your flute's working.
Do you know, I was thinking, do we keep talking or do we find a natural point? And that, you know, I think that's it.
Yeah.
In that, if you take care of your flute, it will take care of you.
Yeah.
And if
absolutely.
you don't, and also the trumpets are starting. But, if you do the due diligence with your practice, you've got nothing to blame or nothing to look at apart from perhaps your instrument.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Keith, before Dr. Keith, the Dr. Keith, there is a story behind me calling Keith the Dr. Keith, or Dr. The.
Dr. The.
Yeah, there is a story behind that, but perhaps on a later date, and the trumpets are starting again. Keith, thank you so much.
That's my pleasure.
And when you're heading back to Iowa?
Monday morning.
Oh, and will you be able to get there? Because I know it's been snow dumping, hasn't it?
We had basically 4 back-to-back storms and about 30 inches of snow the week before I left. It's all starting to melt, and I should be going back to slightly warmer weather. We had some negative 40 wind chills, so, and for the international, that's negative 40 Fahrenheit.
Oh, gosh. Well, the one good thing for me, I'm disappearing today, not going back. I'm going off to Santa Monica to see Gina Luciani.
Oh, give her my best.
I will give you her, give her your best. I will do that. But I think the more important thing is you're going out for dinner tonight. I'm so glad I'm not there.
Yeah, Dave and I are going to have some good shots.
And we'll end on the nerd. I've tried all my life to understand, but when you're talking about the things, the little tiny minutiae that make a huge difference to the flute, all I want to know is I want to be able to blow it and think, oh, I like that. I don't really want to know why.
Yeah.
The difference between me and you is you want to know why something
Absolutely. A 0.5 leak, which is like the thickness of a Pop-Tart wrapper, can make a huge difference. And if you have several of those, the flute's just not going to play.
Yeah, let's not go into that territory.
Yeah.
You've lost me on that already. Dr. Keith Hanlon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean-Paul.
I've been very sort of official there. Keith, thank you. And let's talk again soon. Flute Examiner, how do people find it?
Thefluteexaminer.com.
Simple as that.
That's it, and it's free. You just sign up and you'll get our monthly edition will get sent to you, and we have a Facebook page. So you can just Google Flute Examiner.
It's free, guys.
It's free.
So
we want to keep it that way. I mean, we do take donations. There's small fees that we pay for. We're getting ready to move over to a better platform, and there's stuff happening actually today. Stuff's been happening to make it a better experience for everybody who's reading it. We also welcome contributors. If there are flute players out there who want to share a story or talk about some pedagogical aspect or whatever, we welcome people to submit articles or contact us, and we'll work with them and see what we can do. And we welcome it takes a village. So we're building our flute family and taking care of each other and sharing our stories.
Wonderful. Keith, thank you so much. I do hope this comes out, with all this noise. Those trumpets were just... Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.